Hey, good morning and welcome to challenge number 7 of the Sweet16 Summer Challenges. And as you can probably see in this challenge, there's not so many mountains, waterfalls, sweeping valley views. It's more tarmac, laybys, and cars, bikes and HGVs thundering past. But nevertheless, this is still, for me, a really important walk to include within these challenges, as I'll explain as we get on. So this stretch of road we're walking along is called the A40, and in its entirety the A40 stretches some 250 miles, runs east-west, west-east, right across the south of Wales into England and across the south of England into London. And this stretch here, part of that is cutting through here in Oxfordshire, and it's, you know, this stretch of road is a stretch of road I've travelled hundreds, probably thousands of times over the years. Many journeys, very inconsequential, in to do some shopping or dropping this thing off or picking that thing up or for work or whatever. But of course, 9:45 p.m. on the 16th of September 2025, we made a journey along here that was very significant, and the minutes and the hours that would follow would have a big impact on our lives. And whilst there's no mountains and waterfalls, etc., it's a walk I really wanted to do, because this stretch of road here, about 21 kilometres, is a stretch of road that connects home back in West Oxfordshire with the hospital in central Oxford. And all of these challenges are really around giving thanks and being grateful for the care that we've received in the face of adversity. And in a strange kind of way, this particular walk is about giving thanks for this stretch of road and our proximity to that care. And I can talk a little bit about that, and being things to be grateful for as part of this work in the absence of the beautiful scenery that we've seen in lots of the other challenges. With the beauty of hindsight, at the start of Tuesday the 16th of September, I think we can see that there were dots and signs, but at that point we just hadn't joined them up. There were kind of isolated things that were just spaced out enough that they almost didn't seem connected. But on the morning of Tuesday the 16th, it was the start of a new term, just a couple of days in, and Amelia said, "I just can't get up and go to school today." And that was really unusual. And I think that was like the last sign where we kind of thought, something really isn't right here. So on the back of that, we booked an urgent doctor's appointment for that morning. But in terms of those other signposts, earlier in August, we'd been on holiday in Scotland, and on inclines, we were finding that Amelia was getting very faint. We'd also, in the last sort of couple of weeks before, noticed that her appetite wasn't quite what it was. And in addition to that, there was like the start of a cough that just wasn't going. It was like 1.5, almost 2 weeks of a cough that just wasn't going. So you put all those together with this feeling of complete lack of energy and the inability to be able to get up, which was completely unusual. And that was like the final thing that was like a red flag. No, really something isn't right here. And of course we had no idea what it was, because teenagers, children, they go through illnesses, come and go, and bodies are changing all the time. Nevertheless, we were obviously concerned enough to get that appointment booked, and we did. and we were fortunate enough to be able to get an appointment booked for about midday on the Tuesday. So of course we went along to the appointment with the local surgery at midday. There were conversations between the doctors and nurses, and ultimately they decided that they would take some blood samples and they would be sent off for analysis, and that they would let us know if there was anything we needed to know about. And another appointment was booked for follow-up in 2 weeks. And then we obviously went about our day knowing that we would likely hear something because of the different symptoms that we'd started to kind of feel were meaning something. And it was about 9:30 on the evening of Tuesday the 16th that we both had calls to our mobiles, and we missed them initially. We were kind of getting ready, settling down for the evening, and we called them back, and I clearly remember the number 741. Called them back, and we were asked to essentially come in immediately, come into CDU of the Children's Hospital, the Clinical Decisions Unit. And they obviously didn't give too many details, wanted us to come in. And yeah, about 9:45, having taken those telephone calls, myself and Amelia, we hit this road, heading towards the hospital. So we're just about 10 k's in now. As you can hear, in the background. This road is pretty heaving for most of the day. But at 9:45, 10 o'clock at night, it's quiet. And our journey in was pretty quick, 20-25 minutes. And we arrived at the hospital, and at that time of day the car park was pretty empty also. And going into the hospital itself, the children's hospital, the foyer area was also largely empty of, you know, visitors and people milling around. So it was already quite sort of an eerie feel. And our first thing was to navigate our way to CDU and Bell House. Of course, we didn't know where that was. Level 0, we found our way to it, buzzed ourselves in. The doors opened and we were on to the wards proper. And again at that time of night, 10 o'clock, 10:15 at night, the patients are settled, the lights are very low, it's a very calm, serene environment. And I remember this all second by second, really. Walking down to the corridor, and you have to go through a couple of sets of doors, and it's dark, and I was walking in with Amelia, and eventually we were met and taken into a side room where details were taken and forms were filled out, and then we passed backwards and forwards between a couple of rooms where some further tests were done, observations, temperature, heart rate, and some bloods. Some cannulas were set up, and eventually we were back in to the side room with Dr. S, let's say. I'm not sure if we're allowed to use names. And of course, all this time we're wondering, what have we been called in for? Why are we here? What is it that we're in for? And I think our best guess at trying to pin some of those dots together at the time was maybe it was like COVID, or a bad case of COVID. And of course, within the next few seconds, sat there with Dr. S, we would be told. you know, it's an incredibly difficult message to receive, but it can't be easy to have to deliver that message either. And Dr. S, you know, delivered it with great care. I do know that. But yeah, in truth, as I think many people probably describe, nothing can prepare you for hearing those words, and it's almost a physical feeling that you get, like being hit, so the shock or whatever, and you sort of try and comprehend it. And certainly you, or I, you know, kind of felt a sort of a sense of numbness or confusion. But of course I was sat next to Amelia, and my primary concern was to be there for her and look after her, and you have to sort of try and manage those emotions, as difficult as it is, and be there for Amelia, because of course she was hearing those words for the first time as well. And you know, what Dr. S told us was that based on the blood analysis, it was a suspected diagnosis of leukemia, but they were doing further tests that over the coming hours would either confirm that or deny that. But you know, we asked how, you know, how likely, how confirmed is it? You know, that's your first thought. You think, actually, you know, might be wrong, might not be. But at that point, based on what they saw in the blood, obviously based on all their experience, it was a high likely chance that indeed it was a diagnosis of leukemia. And soon after, you know, we were told, Mal joined us at the hospital, and thankfully Mal's parents were able to come over and look after Benji, who incidentally also, you know, experienced quite a bit of shock with us being there one minute and not the next, and no idea of what's going on. But in the hospital, those tests continued for 3 or 4 hours, and then eventually, around about 2:30, 3, we were able to settle into the room. A million and one things spinning around our heads. You know, at that point, we had no idea in terms of what the path would be, how treatable it would be, what the outlook was. And I think somehow we slept for a few hours, and in the morning there were further conversations, further checks and tests. We saw a few different doctors and nurses, and around about 2 o'clock on the Wednesday the 17th, we first met a called Dr. N, and she came in to the room and confirmed the diagnosis based on the further blood tests that had been taken. And Dr. N said a few really important words at that point. She confirmed the diagnosis and said, "And now we're going to make you better." And presented, at that point, what the next 5 to 6 weeks would look like. What we now know is the induction period. And I think those words from the consultant gave us hope. And it would be that hope that we would carry through the coming hours and days and weeks through the grueling treatment and the intensity of those, but particularly the intensity of those first few weeks. So many procedures and different types of medicine. And on top of that, on top of the treatment, Amelia also had to deal with getting pneumonia, having chronic shoulder and back pain. One of the medicines caused hypoglycemia, where we had to monitor blood sugar very closely. One of the medicines gave a very low mood. And also there were a number of occasions where her temperature would spike and we'd have to go into hospital and be in hospital for 48 hours taking antibiotics in case there was some kind of an infection. So this road here, we came up and down most days. Home to hospital, hospital to home. And I also give thanks to all of the families and all of the children that have gone before, that have received treatment previously, that have meant that the treatments now give hope and have a high success rate. There are a couple of people that have fundraised, that have supported my fundraising, and they've shared a little bit about some of their own stories where their own children in the past have had a leukemia diagnosis. And one in particular was back in the 1980s when the treatment was much more experimental, and I can imagine came with less certainty. And the same person also shared that little boy who received that experimental treatment back in the early 80s has just passed his 50th birthday. I'm so happy for them as a family. And that story gives so much hope. for us. It really does. And again, it kind of just underlines why I'm wearing this t-shirt and why I'm doing these challenges. For in my own small, microscopic way, trying to give something back so that families of the future, where their children are unlucky enough to be diagnosed with leukemia, can also enter in treatment with optimism and hope. And these amazing people on Kamran's ward and at the Children's Hospital can continue to do the brilliant work that they do. If there's any way I can contribute towards that, to give back a little, I'm going to do it. First little glimpse of the tippy top of the Children's Hospital there. It's 20 k's. About 1 more k to go. No mountains on this walk, but a bit of a hill at the end, for sure. It's the closest I can give you to a sweeping valley and a mountainous climb on this walk. There's the Children's Hospital coming into view. Hey, so here we are outside the Children's Hospital now. 21.34 tarmac kilometres, about 4 hours and 45 minutes. Home to the hospital. Sweet 16 challenge number 7. Done.